Hey everybody, it's Amy again, and welcome to another spine-tingling Dueling Rabbits Productions video about Drawloom weaving. Today we are tackling something a little unusual for the Drawloom, a structure that's near and dear to my heart, summer and winter. For the past several weeks, I've been working away on different projects using the same narrow yellow warp in a straight threading on 4 ground shafts. On this one setup, we've examined 2 traditional Drawloom structures, 4-end broken twill damask and Opphämta. By adding a second bout of orange threads to the warp, we even managed some double weave samples. For the final video in the series, I decided to build upon these experiences and use my last few inches of warp for experiments in summer and winter. If you haven't already seen my earlier videos on Damask and Opphämta, I recommend you take a look before delving into summer and winter with me now. Living as I do in eastern Pennsylvania, it sometimes seems like old wool summer and winter coverlets can be found everywhere. It's a traditional, distinctive structure with a great look, and I really enjoy weaving it on my conventional single harness Glamocra standard. For a lover of block weaves like myself, summer and winter offers a lot of bang for the proverbial buck, and a variety of treadlings can be used to vary the pattern's appearance. This dukagong version of the blanket is a favorite of the whole family. But because these days I'm all Drawloom all the time, I decided to challenge myself to see how the structure could be adapted for 2 harnesses using the limited warp I had remaining at my disposal. Along the way, I discovered that there are a lot of surprising benefits to weaving summer and winter on a Drawloom. Let's review the basics before heading to the loom. A quick examination of summer and winter reveals that it is ideal for weaving on the Drawloom. Like Opphämta, summer and winter uses a supplemental weft for patterning on a plain weave ground. In this drawdown, written for a single harness loom, you can see that we are using a yellow warp and a yellow weft to weave the ground cloth. Every other pick, here shown in thicker green, is a pattern row. Like Damask, summer and winter is a unit weave. Each unit contains a specific number of warp and weft threads interlacing in identical ways to produce either pattern or background. Let's isolate and examine a single unit to dig a little deeper. You can see here that our unit contains 4 yellow warp ends and 4 green pattern picks, alternating with yellow tabby picks. Each warp end serves one of 2 purposes. It's either a tie-down end or a pattern end. Look at this very first one. It's raised when the first pattern pick is thrown and subsequently secures or ties it to the top of the cloth. The third warp end also serves as a tie-down for the second pattern pick. The second and fourth warp threads in the unit are pattern ends. On this side of the cloth, the pattern ends are raised for tabby shed 2, but down for both pattern picks. So, 2 tie-down ends alternating with 2 pattern ends per unit, with the pattern weft always floating over both the pattern ends and the tie-down end between them. If we look at the cloth as a whole, we can see that when units are combined, the pattern weft floats across 3 warp ends between tie-downs, all except for the very first and last blocks, which only have 2 thread floats. There are only 2 possibilities for the pattern rows. We'll call this row pattern row A and this row pattern row B. Treadled in this manner, AB, AB, we get this pleasing brick-like arrangement. Now these pattern rows can be treadled in different combinations of 4, A, B, B, A, or B, A, A, B, or even A's only. This causes changes to the appearance of the overall pattern, but it's still the same basic summer and winter structure. We'll revisit these other treadling possibilities when we sit down to weave at the loom. Now this is the side that generally faces up when we are weaving, since it requires lifting only 1 thread in 4 for every pattern row. Which leads us to wonder what's happening on the other side of the cloth. Well, pretty much what you'd expect. Here, we only see the pattern weft where it passes underneath the tie-down end on the other side. From the perspective of this side of the cloth, the pattern weft is floating underneath the 3 warp ends. The upshot is that on this face of the cloth, we only see little peaks of green passing over the middle end of each 3-thread group. Let's make things interesting with the design of 2 pattern blocks. We'll do this by showing both the background overfloats and their opposites on the same side of the cloth. To make it easier to see, I've tripled the blocks widthwise on this drawdown, so each block is 3 units, or 12 warp ends, wide. In a unit, when the tie-down end is raised and the pattern end next to it is down, the pattern weft is tied to the top of the cloth, like this, giving us the appearance of background. When the tie-down end is down and the pattern end next to it is raised, the float is tied to the bottom of the cloth, giving us the appearance of a yellow pattern block. The other side is the opposite. Here's a drawdown with 4 pattern blocks. As with Damask, we can keep adding blocks until we run out of room on our setup. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail about the threading and tie-up on a single harness loom, but a brief review is useful because it will help us see how this thing can be easily adapted to the Drawloom, and how in some ways a Drawloom is a simpler way to weave this structure, efficient though it is on a conventional loom. Summer and Winter is a very shaft-efficient weave because, in addition to the 2 plain weave shafts at the front of the loom, which are both used for tabby shed 1, only 1 shaft is required for each block. This is because the pattern ends do double duty, contributing to both the pattern and tabby shed 2. Here are both our tie-down ends on the 2 shafts at the front of the loom, which Fiberworks insists on calling shafts 1 and 2. Here, on shaft 3, is the pattern end for this block, and here on shaft 4 is the pattern end for this block, and so on our 4 pattern shafts for our 4-block design. Unless you have a computer-controlled or Dobby loom, the bottleneck for adding blocks to our design isn't really the shafts, it's the treadles. And it's easy to see why. You need 2 treadles for plain weave. Tabby row 1 requires shafts 1 and 2 to be lifted together in order to raise all the tie-down ends. Tabby 2 is created by lifting the required unit's pattern end. For efficiency's sake, all the pattern shafts are tied to treadle 2. 2 additional treadles are required for each block's pattern rows. These are tied to the associated pattern shaft together with each of the tie-down ends in turn. This 4-block draft requires 10 treadles and maxes out my single harness standard, even though I still have 2 shafts sitting idle in the corner. Treadles can cause another issue too, at least for me. I personally find the treadling of Summer and Winter on my single harness loom to be kind of confusing, sort of like patting my head and rubbing my stomach at the same time. For each unit, we alternate both tabby and pattern treadles. Sometimes there's quite a stretch between them, and if we are varying the order of our pattern rows, A, B, B, A, or B, A, A, B, for example, it can be hard to keep straight when alternating tabby picks. What I discovered during this experiment was that these 2 key Summer and Winter annoyances, treadle limitation and treadle confusion, disappear when we're weaving on a Drawloom. It's awesome. Let's see how. On a Drawloom, Summer and Winter is woven using a very different strategy that takes advantage of the loom's unique shedding mechanism and 2 harnesses. By separating the tabby and pattern picks, much like we do with Opphämta, and making clever use of the simultaneous rising and falling sheds, like we do with Damask, we are able to weave complex Summer and Winter patterns with as many blocks as we can imagine, using only 4 treadles. Here's the way it works. Tabby first. This part's easy. It's just like our Opphämta setup. All of our 4 ground shafts, remember, straight threading, are tied up to 2 treadles. Tabby is woven simply using the ground shafts, alternating treadles 1 and 2. The pattern tie-up and treadling is simplicity itself. Since the interlacement for every 4-thread unit is the same, that's all we need to concern ourselves with when setting up. Here's an isolated background unit with its floats running along the top surface of the cloth. Our ground shafts are threaded Swedish style 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's look at the two tie-down ends. The first is on shaft 4 for pattern row A. That will be attached to treadle A. The second tie-down end is on shaft 2 for pattern row B. That will be attached to treadle B. These treadles will need to have connections to the long lambs for shafts 2 and 4. Remember, long lambs lift. And look, here they are, white beads on our long lambs connected to shafts 2 and 4. That takes care of pattern rows A and B when I want to show background on the surface that faces up when I am weaving. If I were to alternate my treadling, tabby 1, pattern A, tabby 2, pattern B, ad nauseum, with no pattern shafts raised, this is the cloth I would get. But to weave my pattern blocks, I need to have my weft floats tied to the underside of the cloth. For that, I'll need to raise pattern units and lower 1 warp end in 4 in every pattern row, as we do in this unit here. Here's lowered warp ends 4 and 2. And here's the associated black beads on my short lambs, 4 and 2. Remember, short lambs sink. I treadle tabby with my left foot alternating 2 treadles. I treadle pattern rows A and B with my right foot on just 2 more treadles regardless of how many pattern blocks I have. The pattern shafts take care of the sinking shed mechanism I need for the weft floats to appear on the underside of my cloth. Let's see the setup in action. So here's what I've been doing on this warp. I did reslay the reed a little wider than for the Damask and Opphämta pieces. This is an 8/2 cotton warp, and I started out using the same yarn for my tabby weft and thicker wool for my pattern, but I wasn't too jazzed about how it looked. The pattern was really elongated and it wasn't any good. After a few experiments, this is what I came up with. For the tabby, I'm using 16/2 cotton in more or less the same color as my 8/2 cotton warp. My pattern weft is this green 8/2 cotton doubled. And now it's weaving up in a way I really like. Let's weave this thing. I've reached the halfway point of this motif, and I'm now going to go back out the other side. So I lift shafts 2, 4, 6, 9, and 10 because those are the unit/blocks that I want to weave in yellow on the side I'm looking at. I treadle tabby 1 and throw tabby pick 1. I treadle pattern A and throw my pattern weft. Give it a good thwack. Now I treadle tabby 2 and throw my second tabby pick, and I treadle pattern B and throw my second pattern pick. Back to tabby 1, and back to pattern A. Tabby 2, pattern B. That's my 4-row pattern complete, and now I'm ready to change the pull handles. I repeat the process with the new units raised. Tabby 1, pattern A. Tabby 2, pattern B. Tabby 1, pattern A. Tabby 2, pattern B. I'll keep weaving in this way, treadling pattern rows A, B, and changing my pulls when each unit row is complete. This gives me the brick-like arrangement of pattern rows that we saw on our first drawdown. As with summer and winter woven on a conventional loom, I can of course reorder the pattern rows to change the appearance of my weaving. And it's super easy to do because I only have 2 pattern treadles to worry about. Instead of treadling AB as in our last sample, I can treadle ABBA. This gives me an O in each pattern block on the side of the cloth that's facing up. Instead of O's, I can treadle X's, BAAB, as you see here. This one is always my favorite. Finally, I can weave pattern row A only, totally ignoring treadle B. This gives us the distinctive bars associated with the dukagong pattern technique. Since I find pulling units less confusing, less prone to error, and generally more satisfying than complicated treadling sequence, I am a total convert to summer and winter on the Drawloom. The pattern-making possibilities are almost endless, and quite honestly, the weaving goes much, much faster than you might imagine.